Well, hello, and welcome to our continuing devotional in the book of Philippians. We're in the final chapter of Philippians chapter 4, and we're going to be picking it up in verse 2. Here's what Paul says. I entreat Euodia and I entreat Syntyche to agree in the Lord. Yes, I ask you also, true companion, to help these women who have labored side by side with me in the gospel together with Clement and the rest of my fellow workers whose names are in the book of life. So Paul mentions two people with whom we are unfamiliar otherwise, two ladies, Euodia and Syntyche, and I'm not sure on the pronunciation of their names. But here you have two sincere Christians. And they're not just Christians, but they're Christian workers. As Paul says, these women have been companions to him. They have labored side by side with him in the gospel. He values their work. He sees them as spiritually mature and that they have been faithfully serving Christ. But here these two women are in some kind of disagreement. And I want that to kind of sink in because sometimes we have this mindset that if we're following Christ and they're following Christ, there's not going to be any kind of conflict, any kind of friction in our relationships. And that's just not reality. There are going to be times where we disagree, where we're not on the same page. Sometimes that will be doctrinally on what we might call secondary, tertiary issues, not fundamentals. But sometimes it's just going to be on what direction we should go, whether should we minister in this area or that area? How should we handle a problem? Whatever, we don't know. Paul gives us no real details about whatever the disagreement was, but he sees it as a potential hindrance to the gospel and not a witness to the world. So he says, I beg you, I entreat you to agree in the Lord. You may not agree on the issue, but agree to disagree in love and kindness so this doesn't create friction and division and divisiveness in the church. Sometimes in humility, we just simply have to say, you know what? I'm not going to insist on my way. I'm not going to insist on my rights. Uh, my opinions may remain, but I'm choosing for the sake of the witness that we have for the Lord to let go of those things and not let friction divide us in our church. And so Paul says in verse 3, I ask you also, true companion. We don't know the name of this person, to whomever Paul's writing the letter directly besides the church at Philippi. He says, you need to step in here, Paul, friend. Help these women. They're faithful. They've labored side by side with the gospel together with Clement, the rest of the fellow workers whose names are in the book of life. But right now there's a problem. Be an intermediary, be a mediator, be a peacemaker. Get in there and don't let this become like a poison, like an infection that spreads through the whole church. And that's also true today. I've been a pastor now for 30 years, and I can tell you, Christians are loving, kind, faithful people for the most part, but they do sometimes, it's not common, but it does happen where there's friction, where there's frustration, where there's disagreement, where they just can't get on the same page. And when that's the case, we have to choose to walk in humility and to make our witness to the world and the glory of Christ more important than our own opinions or getting what we want or what we think is best. I hope that you and I will have that same attitude. And if there's anybody that we have a friction, disagreement, problem in our relationship with, and they're a Christian particularly, that we will, one way or the other, get that settled so it doesn't become a hindrance or hurt in any way our service of Christ and the glory of Christ. And I trust that you will do that. Have a blessed day.